Namaskar. Um, and first, I'd like to compliment Sampath ji for this absolutely inspiring talk. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आपने जो सारी बातें बताई. वैसे तो हम देखते रहते हैं, आपके पुराने फ़ैन हैं, मुरीद हैं, लेकिन आज आपसे यहाँ साक्षात्कार हुआ, उसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. I'd also like to thank the curators of this event for including me in this series on fearless women, because I'm afraid I have to make a confession to start with, that for somebody who stands petrified in fear at the sight of a baby lizard crossing the ceiling several feet away from me, I can hardly qualify to be called fearless. But at the same time, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to be able to share my experience of having come into the magical world of Indian music, becoming a part of it, and for having such a wonderful life with the companionship of music. In a sense, fearlessness is of several kinds. There is, of course, fearlessness and the courage that a lady like Sampath ji has shown. The act of courage, the things the challenges that she has been able to overcome are just absolutely awe-inspiring. But for an artist, I think, the challenges are of a different kind. And in a sense, it's easier to be fearless. Because what do? You are swept away by this impulse. You are swept away by this strange compulsion to follow your passion for music, follow your passion for the arts. And therefore it becomes, there is no time either to fear or to be fearless. You just are swept into this journey of discovery, of getting knowledge, of being yourself. And I happen to be one of those people who was given this opportunity and who has been able to enjoy a life of music. I'd also like to place in context my own journey, and for that I would need to draw your attention to the fact that even 100 years ago, professional musicians, whether they were male performers or female performers, belonged to a certain community, to certain communities in different parts of the country. So if you were a professional musician, you probably belonged to a khandan of hereditary musicians who held in their families traditional knowledge of various kinds and passed it on to successive generations. Therefore, people like you, me, perhaps could not have become musicians. We neither could have trained in music, and we certainly could not have become performers in public spaces. These khandani or gharanedar musicians were the custodians of immense amounts of musical knowledge, and it's only much later, and far more recently, that the common person, people from any walk of life, have had the opportunity to study music and to make it their calling in life. With respect to women performers, it was even more so. Women performers too came from different communities of professional performers, and these women were addressed by various terms. They were referred to by various terms, like, for example, courtesans, songstresses. Some used the word tawayaf, some used the word patur. There were all kinds of names that were associated with them, terms that were associated with them. Only women from those communities were actually professional performers who could stand in the public gaze and perform. This was not about being able to sing, let's say, a bhajan or a kirtan at home while you were praying, but to be out in a public space, in the male gaze. You had to belong to a certain community of women performers. These performers were greatly acclaimed. They were respected for their skills. They were respected for their art. They were respected for their deep knowledge of poetry, music. But there was a social stigma attached to them. They were not, in society, they were not looked upon with respect. There was always an element of disrepute attached to them. However, for me to be called a fearless woman performer today, I have much to thank these women. I myself don't come from a family of hereditary musicians at all. My parents were teachers of English literature at the Allahabad University, a very well-respected institution of learning at the time that they were students. My paternal grandfather was head of the Department of English, and many of my members of my family have been and are still academicians. My maternal grandfather was an artist, a painter, a watercolor painter, who died tragically young and left behind his widow, my maternal grandmother, whose name was Purnima Manohar Lal, to bring up her 3 very, very young daughters, of whom my mother, Jaya, was the eldest. My grandmother was born in 1900, and she was very, very keen to learn Hindustani classical music, but never got the opportunity to do so, because her father felt that this was not something, this was really, it would not be the appropriate thing for a young lady to learn. He allowed her to learn the piano, but not Hindustani classical music. We never heard my grandmother play the piano, but in our family photo albums, we have these exquisite pictures of my grandmother dressed up in a sari and posing in the garden with all manner of Indian instruments. There was a sitar, I think. There's a sarangi, there's a bela. So she's just posing in various places, holding those instruments, but she could never really learn Indian music. However, she taught her 3 daughters, including my mother, who was only 11 when my grandfather died. She taught all her daughters and encouraged them to learn to sing and dance, and yet she did not think it an appropriate profession for any one of them to actually adopt. I must also point out that my maternal grandmother was highly educated. Though she did not complete her master's in mathematics, she was a working woman all her life and was chief inspectress of schools for many, many years, and then later started preparatory schools for small children independently. My mother seemed to have this great passion for music, but because her mother was not certain that it was an appropriate career choice for her to make, my mother remained passionate about music and the arts, but did not take it up professionally. But she taught me and my sister Ragini, who is here with me today, she gave us the opportunity to study music and dance, and she gave us many, many opportunities to listen, to engage with the arts through theater, exhibitions, concerts, all manner of events. And when I was graduating, when I was finishing my bachelor's at Allahabad University, my mother, in consultation with my father, made me a fantastic offer. She had realized that this is what I love best, this is what probably is my calling in life, and she said to me that, look, you don't have to go the conventional way of finishing your bachelor's degree, then doing a master's, and then going on towards academics, and then finding a teaching job in the university. You don't have to do anything of that. I can see that you're crazy about music. And I think that what I would like to give you is a chance to explore that. So I'm going to ask you to take a year off from your studies. This is right after I graduated. Take a year off and decide whether you want to do music, because if you want to do music, you need to commit to it. You can't continue learning music in this kind of serious hobby way. So you have to study, you have to perform well in your examinations, and if there's time left over, then do a little bit of Rag Yaman and Darbari. That is no longer possible or feasible. I can see that you're drawn to this, but you have to make a commitment, and you have to find that commitment from within yourself. I can't make the commitment for you. I can only say that I will support you. Now, please consider that this was over 30 years ago. I'm talking about a time over 30 years ago, when my mother makes me this offer, and while it was a wonderful surprise for me, it didn't take me a year to decide. Within a month, I had decided that this is what I want to do. And I did do a master's in music from the Allahabad University, but I continued to study music, and I still continue to study music. However, what I'd like to share with you is the fact that here was this very fearless offer made by my mother. And it was possible for me to see this as an option. Possibly I would have had to spend many unhappy years trying to find this space for myself, but it was made easier by the fact that my parents offered me unconditional support. Also, nobody put any conditions on me. The only condition was that I have to commit to studying music. But nobody told me that it's 2 years since you started learning. When are you going to perform on radio? When are you going to perform on television? Tumhara to kuch ho nahi raha hai. Kya kar rahe ho ye aa karke? Nobody said this. In fact, I remember quite clearly that constantly my mother and my father would say that this is a wonderful opportunity. You have a wonderful guru in Pandit Ramashree Jha, who was one of the greatest scholar musicians and composers of contemporary times. He's in Allahabad, he is willing to teach you, he's spending time teaching you. And so this is an opportunity that cannot be lost. But nobody ever asked me when the returns would start coming in. And that gave me the chance to really see whether this is what I enjoyed best, whether this is what I wanted to continue doing. At this point of time, I was learning two forms, khayal and thumri, both of which form part of the Hindustani classical music system. Let me try and tell you the kind of environment, the kind of ethos in which this training took place. So on the one hand, I was going to class at university. I would go at regular times for specific durations. Each class would be 45 minutes, etc., etc. But other than that, I would go to my guru's home in a very small part of Allahabad, where he would open his home, as is the tradition. The Gurukul would be opened to all his disciples on days when he chose to do so. So my father and my mother would wake me up early in the morning, and my father had a Lambretta scooter on which I would perch and start singing as he drove to my guru's home. When we reached his home, it could be, let's say, 5:30 in the morning, and I would hear Panditji already singing. He would already be up and doing his own riyaz. Now I'd peep in, go in and touch his feet and find that 6 other people from the city, his other disciples, are already there. Now, if they are already there, they are my seniors, they have reached before me, so obviously they're going to be taught first. And if there are 6 of them, and if he chooses to spare even, let's say, an hour to an hour and a half on each one of them, what's going to happen to me? I'm just going to get the chance to sit there and listen. Now, for many people, this could be a very unreasonable thing. You get up in the morning, you go there, and yet you are not going to get your talim, your teaching lesson. And, but I have to say that this was a privilege. To be allowed, to be permitted to listen in onto the talim of other disciples is a great privilege that was given to me. Yet, I would fret and fume and say, मैं इतनी जल्दी उठ गई और मैं इतनी दूर गई और मेरे को आज सीखने का भी chance नहीं मिला. Then, when you were taught, it is possible that during that time, other very accomplished singers would come and sit all around because they were going to learn from him after you. And I often repeat this incident that when I started learning, there are each voice has its own qualities. So there are certain things that you negotiate with great ease. There are certain things which you have to improve upon and which you have to practice relentlessly to achieve. Now, because I had never had any training in classical music, an area called taan was very difficult for me. So I could sing a tune, you know. If Guruji sang a tune, I could possibly repeat it. But when it came to technicalities like taan, I was hopeless. And taan is this very fast passage. So you have to go, like that. So you have to build up your voice. You have to train your voice to do this. And I couldn't do it naturally. So every day, I would go back after my lessons and not do it because I was lazy and I didn't want to, you know, try and overcome this. I would go back for my talim, and in front of everybody, all these accomplished singers, everybody knew that I was going to be blasted out at the point when the taans would start. And Guruji was a stern, strict teacher. So very often, he wasn't comforting and kind. He could be very sarcastic. And he would tell my father, अरे सब छोड़ दीजिए, ये सब लोग फैशन के लिए सीखने आते हैं. इनका क्या है, इनको गजल वजल सिखा दीजिए, थोड़ा डिनर के बाद गा देंगे, इनके बस की बात नहीं है. गवैया बनना इनके बस की बात नहीं है. And I would feel very humiliated. Once I remember that I was really scolded severely, so much so that I felt very humiliated. And on the way back, I told my father, I'm sorry, I'm not going to go back next time. And my father said, well, who the hell are you to say that you won't go back? You were at fault. You hadn't practiced. And that's why you got the scolding. I mean, own up. You hadn't practiced well enough. So I told myself that, okay, I'm going to practice. I'm going to achieve this in a week's time. Or I'm not going to go back after that. So I spent my week religiously going through those, you know, ups and downs and exercises, up and down. I zipped, and everybody at home was quite surprised at the sudden commitment to Tan. And I went back, and I was eager. You know, I was waiting to show off. So I reached, and I had this sort of smug look on my face and said, I'll show you today, you know. So the lesson starts. Everybody is calm till the Tan comes, and everybody starts getting tense that, oh, she's going to get it now. But no, I do my exercises, and everybody sort of, I can feel the tension being released. But I could see Guruji saying, aha, oh, acha. And he could also see the smugness and arrogance on my face and in my body language. So he had taught me just these simple, you know, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, just ups and downs, which I had practiced. He said, okay, I'll give you another pattern. So he gave me slightly crooked ones. Nisa gama pa ma gama pa nisa ni, etc. And there I slipped again. And then he looked at me, and he had this knowing smile on his face, and he said, ab kahan gayi chaturai? And truly, the lessons that one learns during this kind of intimate Guru-Shishya teaching, where the Guru customizes the training for each disciple, for each Shishya, actually teaches you many things other than the music. One of the things it also teaches you is to acknowledge your imperfections, to be able to assess brutally your own weaknesses and thereby try and improve on them. Perhaps that's where some of the fearlessness comes from. To be able to say that, look, I'm flawed, I have these imperfections, is not easy. And it's only when you recognize those imperfections that you're able to improve upon them, knowing full well that you perhaps will spend your life trying to overcome those imperfections and yet never reach perfection. What does an artist do? Look for that perfection which he or she possibly knows is never going to be his or hers. But I really feel that the ability to accept my limitations, to accept my own musical nature, sensibility, my own sense of aesthetics, has come from this wonderful discipline and from this wonderful teaching that I was fortunate to get from many, many great wise gurus and scholars. It gave me the chance to be myself in music, knowing full well, for example, one of the things that I'd like to share with you, for example, is the fact that very often people find my voice, some call it the kind of more good-hearted people call it powerful. The others who don't know where to put it, they say, wo folk type ki aapki awaaz hai na? There are some who just say, well, you know, it's just too, it's not a feminine voice. Interestingly, this whole issue of femininity, of a feminine voice, of having a voice that does not have masculine traits or does not have androgeneity, is one that really fascinates me. Because if you listen to the many, many kinds of voices of women performers, huge, powerful, booming voices have always been there, as have these beautiful, clear, tinkling bell kind of voices. But when it comes to being told that ye is actress ko suit karega, for example, a lot of people ask me, why don't you sing in films? And I quip and I say, heroine ko thoda sa mota hona padega meri awaaz ke liye. But quite apart from that sort of frivolous joke and that flippant remark, really speaking, there is at times a pressure to conform to what will fit in and what is known as a formula for success. And I think every artist faces that. To be yourself, make the art, make the music, write the verse that you want to. To find your own voice in your own expression is really a question of not having to, or not feeling the pressure to conform. Most artists face this issue. Many succumb, and others remain open to the challenges that being independent and finding your own, the entire journey actually makes you, prepares you for the many battles, the many little battles, the many artistic and aesthetic battles that you have to fight. Very often, people will say that you have to find the gharana mode to be able to be accepted in the world of Hindustani classical music. If you don't belong to a particular gharana, and that to a gharana which has a powerful say in matters of who becomes a star, you are not going to make your presence felt in the world of Hindustani classical music. In a sense, the artist then has to be a bit of a pariah, has to choose his or her own place. I have chosen to be the pariah. And therefore, some people say, you know, wonderful, wonderful, and others actually hurl stones at me. But the fact that I've been able to say that these are my limitations, to accept that these are my limitations, to have this wonderful opportunity to study music, to continue to study music, to have had the opportunity to be trained by some of the finest, wisest scholars and musicians, and to have had the opportunity to actually interact with many, many people from different styles of music, that has really been, for me, an absolutely wonderful journey. I heard in the introduction that I've made my own genre of music. Again, a confession. No, I have not been able to make my own genre of music. I've just been somebody who's very excited by different kinds of music. So when a musician from another genre of music, let's say Shantanu Moitra, who I believe was a speaker in the last series, in the same Shift series, when he invites me to sing an Apke Sawan or a Sikho Na, I'm happy to do so. I don't worry about the fact that I'm overweight, I am far from middle-aged, I mean more than middle-aged now. I just sing what I like, and I enjoy the process, and I refuse to feel abashed about it. And that really has been for me the big thing in my life, to follow, to make the music that I'll enjoy, that I believe in, that I don't have to be apologetic about, and to be able to say that yes, on certain occasions I haven't done well enough. When I listen to my own music, very often I'll find you saying, please switch it off, I can't bear to hear it. And to be able to say that, no, this was not my best, I would have liked to redo it. I think that is really what has been a great journey for me, and I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to share this with you. Thank you. So I'd like to sing a few lines from a song that I recorded many years ago, which was written by Prasoon Joshi, and it was part of the album called Man Ke Manjeere, which was dedicated to the dreams and aspirations of women. It was modeled on a traditional wedding song, where the family of the bride asks the little young bride, what kind of groom would you want? And so she says to her father, find me a groom. And she says, don't find me a groom like this, don't find me let's say a goldsmith, because I don't really care for jewelry, for ornaments. And the last part of that is really beautiful, powerful statement about the status of women in society, in Indian society. So I'm going to share those lines with you. Babul jiya mora घबराए बिन बोले रहा ना जाए बाबुल जिया मोरा घबराए बाबुल मोरी इतनी अरज सुन ली जो मोहे लोहार के घर दे दीजो मोहे लोहार के घर दे दीजो जो मोरी जंजीरें पिघलाए जो मोरी जंजीरें पिघलाए